Alright, so welcome to another streaming, the kind of thing that will be recorded now. So, right, hello and welcome back, and those of us who survived the first 15 minutes that weren't recorded, now we can all rejoice, and let's talk about grammar things before we go and talk about refugees and all that sort of crazy stuff, which is a bit more political. But I have to do this disclaimer that I'm not a very political person. I can be defeated very easily in about 10 seconds when it comes to politics, mostly because I quit. And I'm more of a grammar kind of person, I guess. So let's do the thing. So here we go. First of all, let me just remind you that I will create an event for each of the things, probably with a different picture because this is getting confusing. But I will create another event next Wednesday. I already have some stuff, which I don't... Yeah, there is this thing. Streaming on Wednesday, the 12th of April. So that's cool. Right, now let's talk about this thing. And this is the book that I usually recommend. This question is not about this book, but if you want to do stuff alone or have to do stuff alone, I recommend this book. Maybe with this one, I think that's from the same kind of people. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to words, I really encourage everyone to take an expression that you like, for instance here, and then you actually just put them into sentences, because without sentences there is not much we can remember when it comes to languages. So let me create 2 sentences with these. This one is quite easy. And this one is also kind of easy. So, yeah, there we go. I mean, 2 seemingly very similar expressions, but I guess the trick here is that this one is very different in a sentence. It means different. This has the T, and I guess you know already that the T is object. So whatever I do here, which means I make stuff, I create stuff, I create everything. And then here, this one means every time. So that expression means every time, but really time as in time. Right, yeah. Well, okay, so we are back, and unfortunately again crashed the whole thing. I don't know why. But let's go back to the thing very quickly. So I was talking about these 2 distinct expressions, and I said Minden, időben means every time, but really what it means is it refers to the weather. So not really time, but the weather itself. I know it's kind of confusing, but it could be as confusing as anything in any other kind of language. So let's just go and leave that behind. And then Mindent, időben. Időben means in time. So that's very different. I think the biggest difference here is quite easy. I hope that I was able to convey that one of them is an expression that uses 2 words, minden, időben, and the other one that's just that the two things, the two words are next to each other is just something that's a coincidence. So that's how things go, unfortunately. Yeah. Now, right. And then there was another question concerning different thugs. I'm just copying everything back there. So the other question was, what's the difference between majd and akkor? So let's go over that one. Okay, this is very similar to the previous example. And of course I'm not going over all these sentences, but if you have any questions, just ask them. That's not a problem. Even just if you find me on Facebook or Skype. But my point is really that we took these expressions and we didn't care much about the sentences. But in reality, what you should do is, well, really just try to decipher the sentences, and this may take up to half an hour or maybe an hour. The point is that you really should, when you have an example sentence about an expression that you want to learn, just, you know, try to write it down, try to understand it, and then make tiny alterations. See what you can do with that expressions, and play around. Okay, now majd and akkor. Again, it's the same thing, and what happens is that majd means at that time, and akkor means at that time. And then, you know, it's quite disappointing, wouldn't you say? It's just they mean the same. But technically, what I can, without actually going very deep about them, majd means something that you keep putting off, and akkor is used in situations when you're concerned about an if situation. So if, then you will do that. And then majd is really all about things that you keep putting off, but it's just, you know, you will do it at that time. And I think what I can actually compare this to is the difference in English between I like running and I like to run. They essentially mean the same. It means that they mean that I like running. But there is a difference between them. However, when it comes to beginners in Hungarian, or in English, I would say you can ignore that. But if you are getting deeper and deeper into the language, then you have to start differentiating. I told you the difference. One of them is putting things off and the other isn't, so you know about it. But if you are a beginner, I have to strongly suggest that you just you know, put it off and then just do stuff. And yeah. And then another question is at hand, which is, what is the difference between látlak and látlak téged? Well, technically, the only difference is you, because the téged part means you, essentially, and that's a pronoun, just like in English. But in English, the language uses pronouns all the time. In Hungarian, because everything is all about attachments, and everything can be and will most probably be solved by attachments or using attachments. Everything that is a pronoun and it's in a sentence, it will emphasize the meaning of that particular word, in this case the verb. So while látlak means I see you, látlak téged means I see you in particular, against your will or something, really something. Let me just copy this into the description and immigrants and good weather. Okay, good. Okay. Sorry, I just had to take a little bit of time off for administration. But, right. So that's all the things that were questions. And then the other questions, or at least one or two, were about this whole immigrant situation. Now, the first half of the video is kind of up. Now we will talk about mostly political stuff, which, again, like I said before, I'm not very good at. Because I care very little about politics. I know it's important, but to me what's important is people, like the people who actually live in the country. And whenever I visit a country, I'm interested in what it is like living there and then talking to people there. And most people are not the members of the ruling political party, so I don't really have any need to go political. For the longest time I didn't even realize what left wing and right wing was. But nevertheless, my point here is that when we will, or I will, talk about refugees in Hungary, it's very important that you remember that it's not about politics. So we all know that refugees, mostly from Syria, came here because of a civil war that's going on there. However, as a person who lives in Hungary, I have absolutely no effect on the civil war situation. I mean, I don't even have a gun, so I can't just go there and shoot people. So what I'm concerned about is that suddenly there are different new people at the border, and how my country handles these kind of people. Now, what happened in mainly 2016 is that the country, or 2000, anyways, the country of Hungary did a horrible job when it came to handling refugees, because in my little world, without any proper knowledge of how things should work, when it comes to new people popping up at the border, wanting to come in, the only reasonable thing anyone can do is somehow create a process for them. And obviously we have to differentiate between three main categories. Refugees who have nowhere to go, absolutely nowhere. If you deny refuge, they will be dead in 2 days or something. There are immigrants that come here for the opportunity, and of course they can be denied because not all of them are needed from a capitalist point of view. And capitalism, as opposed to this whole idea of communism, deals with worth. self-worth or financial worth or something like that. So immigrants can be denied. And then there are terrorists who look like anyone else, and then they are here to cause trouble. Of course, ideally, you should filter out all the terrorists, you should filter out all the immigrants that are not very good, however cruel that is, and then grant refuge for the refugees, because that's okay. So it's good in theory, isn't it? I mean, in my world it works perfectly. It's awesome, it's fantastic. But what Hungary did was actually don't process them, just, you know, let them stand at the border. And then people never believe me when I say that if you want to deal with the government in Hungary, so I need a new license plate for my car, I need a new ID card or a passport or something. It's torturous. It's horrible. In Hungary, it's never on time. It's never as good as you expect it to be. It's horrible to deal with the government. Now imagine this inefficient, horrible government dealing with this whole new situation where they don't even have an action plan. And as a result, the only sane, and I have to put that into quotation marks, only sane decision that our dear leader, I mean Prime Minister, came up with was to build a fence on the border where they want to cross. And that's kind of harsh. But the problem is that they kept crossing. And they kept wanting to go through Hungary to Austria to Germany. Now, some people said that let them cross, you know. But then the other people say that we have an obligation as a European Union member, that we have to, it's our job to filter out terrorists and not wanted immigrants. I mean, those immigrants that we don't want. And then let the refugees in and all that. Since we didn't do any sort of good enough job in that area, then hence, you know, the wall. So keep them out, that's the safest thing. We don't have to do anything. It's sort of like when people want help from you and then you just put your phone on silent, which is a good way of dealing with things as a person, but not as a country. Because then you have a huge political and backlash in the news. So yes, Hungary is building a wall, Hungary is horrible, Hungary is full of idiots and all that sort of stuff, referring to the government of Hungary, of course, because no sane person would project that onto the people of Hungary, even though that technically these people, the citizens of Hungary, elected the current ruling party. But that's a tale for another time. So, technically, and the question is valid, the European Union sent us money to deal with things. The only thing we didn't want to do is the work itself. And it's really, really hard to motivate someone with money if they don't really want to work. So, right. Now, amidst all that, this is from a technical point of view, that the government's inability to actually do stuff, their lack of, well, you know, determination to talk about stuff, they wanted to package this into a very good marketing package. So now I can talk about how it went to the press, seemingly the government wanting to communicate of their own technical failure regarding the things. And so these questions are quite valid. For instance, with the influx of immigrants, is the government concerned about preserving Hungarian culture? Yes, of course. That was communicated, that our culture will be absolutely lost in the drain if we let refugees in. What about how much money did the EU give to Hungary? Loads of money, unbelievable. Our highway system, our basic infrastructure regarding roads and whatnot is based on European Union money. Most of the development in the country is based on European Union money. That's as much as I can say because I don't know the numbers. But that's what I kept when I did any sort of tiny bit of research. That's what I did. And of course, it's very easy to do the research. You only have to drive through Hungary because it is mandatory. I mean, it's a rule or a law or whatever in the European Union that if you use European Union money, you have to put up like a huge sign saying how much money the EU gave you. It's sort of like a advertisement. And then I see these kind of signs all the time. So it's really, yeah, right. So something like this, just to, so this is half government, half European Union. It says the European Union and the Hungarian government gave 34 million forints to this kind of company to do whatever. And of course, yeah, there you go. So yeah. Technically, we are talking about an insane amount of money, and then now, at least nowadays, the European Union devised a plan that they have to do something with the refugees. We are talking about, I don't know, 100,000 people or something. So each country, based on their development or based on their financial strength, they have to accommodate some refugees. Now, when it comes to Hungary, what are we talking about? Hungary is a country of 10 million people. It's not that huge. It's only 10 million. So what would you say? How many refugees are we talking about? Maybe 1 million? That would be 10% of the country. No. 100,000? That would be maybe 1% of the country? Not very good with percentage. Or some percentage of the country. No, we are talking about a couple of thousand. Maybe 1 or 2. Again, I don't know the numbers. Probably there are people who would love, actually love researching these kind of things. So it's awesome. But okay, now here is here's another question, and that is probably the most political question. And let me see if I can answer that. Say Hungary was possibly thinking bring back some socialist ideas. Sure, it did, but why won't the EU support it? It's not like they want to bring back communism. Right, well, the problem with socialism or communism, and the reason it failed, is simply because the government wanted to run the country. That included corporations, small businesses, and everything that there is to do about the country. So a good example today would be the government, the current Hungarian government, actually employs about 300,000 people doing not much, because otherwise they would be unemployed, because they just can't work. So, is this good for the country? Well, obviously we don't want people to starve, but the government uses this whole thing to pump up statistics. So now we have 300,000 more jobs, but that's ridiculous because that's based on the taxpayers' money. So 300,000 people are employed directly from taxpayers' money. The problem with this is that it's not financially viable. There is a reason why this whole communism idea, the whole Soviet Union fell, or got disbanded, because you just cannot have this thing. You cannot control and make things unprofitable. Capitalism it's something that it's evil, but it works because it is based on motivating people who want to work more and get a better reward. Socialism and communism, on the other hand, do not motivate. They together do not motivate people. And the problem is really that it looks good on paper, but again, I mean, half of the world was socialist, and then aiming for communism 20 years ago, even after I was born, and it didn't work. So bringing back socialist things is awesome. However, socialist things when it comes to infrastructure, healthcare, and all that sort of basic human needs is cool. But for instance, a lot of politicians who try to argue against these 300,000 jobs say that instead of creating 300,000 jobs, what if you take that money and give food to everyone? It's more viable, and people would not have an empty stomach. So you solve the problems of 300,000 people, or with that same amount of money you solve the problems of, I don't know, 1 million people with food that the government produces. So that is buying food for people. That to me is a socialist thing. But the problem with that sort of half capitalist, half socialist thing is that it doesn't work. It's a waste of money. Now, last thing, and then really I have to go, is that come on, let me just copy this. It says immigrants don't want to conform, but they feel they can impose their culture and we should be okay with it. Yeah, well, yeah. Again, it's the lack of processing. Because when you're talking about immigrants, they can be denied. And they are in no position of actually they are in a non-negotiating position. So either you come to our country and you adapt to our laws, maybe we can come up with a compromise, that's fine. But the problem is that Europe is at the moment trying to be very open. Hungary, as usual, is trying to be insanely closed, and hence there is a problem. And in my opinion, none of the parties are right. You cannot be completely open, because then somebody comes in and overstays their welcome. And you cannot be completely closed, because you will end up being hated and despised by other countries because you build a wall. So right now, at this moment, the Hungarian government is still actively trying to oppose Brussels, the European Union, about these kind of refugee problems. And I think and this is probably the worst closing line ever, my problem is simply I don't understand the government, whether they are talking about immigrants, which could be denied, or refugees, which should be helped to some extent. So I guess that is the problem. And I believe this marks the end of a hopefully okay streaming, and then next time we will meet on the regular Wednesday, and hopefully will be cool.